As we are approaching the one-year anniversary of the mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, yesterday was the release of the full-length documentary, Parkland, Inside Building 12.
Joining us right now is a friend of a show, Dr. John Duffy. He's a parenting expert and clinical psychologist. Dr. Duffy, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
So you've seen the full film. Is this something we should be watching, and should we watch it with our kids, or what's your take?
It's absolutely something we should be watching. It is a difficult film to watch. It really is, from beginning to end.
Yeah.
It is painful, but it's a reality. It's something we're dealing with in today's world. And I hate to say we should be watching this with our kids, even our pretty young kids.
I was going to say, what age is appropriate?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's really about developmental level, but if you feel like your child can handle the subject matter here, it's probably important that he or she be involved in it, in large part because we can't protect our kids from this. You know,
No.
A year ago, our kids as young as 7 or 8 years old were keenly aware that this was going on. So to say we're not going to talk about this anymore leaves them kind of like, you know, without a net, without anybody to talk to.
It's something we wish wasn't a reality and didn't exist, but unfortunately that's the world that we live in at this point.
It is.
We had some pretty big conversations here in our newsroom and just about what people's children are going through. And as I ask you what is the appropriate age, we know that 5-year-olds, kindergartners, are actually going through these active shooter drills at their schools.
When you think about the difference, so when I was initially starting in my business, Columbine happened. And we were able to control the narrative around that and turn off the TV, and our kids weren't exposed to it for some time. Now, your 5-, 6-year-old knows exactly what's going on. There's a notification that pops up. There's something on the iPad. There's a kid in kindergarten who will tell your child this is what's going on. So to protect your child from this is folly. They're going to know what's going on.
Because I know a lot of parents, they say, I don't watch the news. I don't want the news on. I don't want my kids to hear the news or what's going on in the day, just in general.
Sure.
But this is something that we can't really get away from.
Right. The news in general is something we can't get away from because we think the news still is this half hour once a day, when in fact our kids are getting news all the time, right? All the time, right?
Yeah.
You know, whether it's through an app or whether it's through Twitter or friends, they know what's going on. So we have to be there to protect them from it and to let them know what's going on.
Yeah, and what were your biggest takeaways from this film?
I thought it was really amazing how they honored each and every single one of these 17 people and humanized every single person who was injured or murdered that day. And that's so different than the way it used to be, where we knew the shooters' names and we talked about those and we kind of almost glorified those.
Yep.
Now, I feel like we're really paying attention to who are these victims, and by really recognizing their humanity, I think a lot of these child activists are able to go out and say, these are the people who died. These are the people we've lost. And I think there's something really, really powerful about that.
Yeah. And at the very least, teaching empathy for another person, another human being, another life, teaching someone to appreciate that for what it is. I think it's so important. Do you have a few takeaways that parents can use as a launching ground? Of course, the documentary will be there, but what can parents do?
Yeah, so I encourage judicious use of a pause button. In other words, this is a movie where if you just watched it for the 2 hours, it's a long movie by design, I believe. But if you pause it here and there and you ask your child, no matter how young they are, what do you think they're experiencing right now? What do you think this person is feeling right now? What do you think this is like for them?
Okay.
You can really, really teach empathy in real time. And you can also check in with your child and say, are you comfortable watching the rest of this?
I don't want to scare them. As a parent, I don't want my child to sit here and be scared about what's going on. That's why I try to protect them. So how do I judge that?
Yeah, it's hard to give kids context for the reality that this doesn't happen all the time.
Okay.
But it happens frequently enough that as a culture, we have to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to think about it every single day. I don't want you to, and we're working really hard to get everything in place so that you are safe and your friends and classmates are
Because
safe.
I want them to be smart. I want my child to feel prepared. I want them to be ready to walk out into the world, but I don't want them to be scared.
Right.
Yeah, it
It's
sounds like
already
a
enough
delicate balance
things.
between
Yeah.
being prepared for the worst, but also not freaking out about it.
You've probably read in recent weeks about active shooter drills and
Yeah.
whether that's useful for
Yeah.
kids. And I think that's still an ongoing debate because I think it does, with the kids I work with, it creates a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that it's doing what it's intended to do. I'm not sure it's really preparing anybody. If you watch the movie, you can still see 20 years after Columbine, there's chaos in the wake of this. And I don't know if we're ever going to be able to avoid that. So to over-prepare kids for this kind of thing, when in fact the reality is probably going to look different than the drill,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
sure there's utility to that.
Okay,
Thank
but
you
at
so
least
much.
talking about it
Yeah.
is good.
Yeah.
Have to
Emotionally.
talk about it, I think, with any age.
Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us about this today, a very important topic.
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Duffy, visit his website for more information. Go to drjohnduffy.com and be sure to also check out his podcast, Better. To learn more about the film, visit InsideBuilding112.com.